Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Curut Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1997 Italian film Academy Award winning film Life is Beautiful, or to all you paisanos out there, La Vita è Bella. The genre, it's a comedy drama set between 1937 pretty much well up until 1941. It was filmed in Italy. It was directed by Roberto Benigni, and it was produced by Gianluigi Braschi and Elda Ferri. The script was written by Roberto Benigni and Vincenzo Cerami. The music was done by Nicola Povani, the cinematography Tonino Delacelli, and it was edited by Simona Paggi. The stars of the movie, I hope I'm not offending anybody by murdering anybody's name. So if you feel any way offended, my sincerest apologies. The stars of the movie are Roberto Benigni, Nicoletta Braschi, Giorgio Cantarini, Guestino D'Arano, and Horst Buchholz. Now the synopsis, it starts off in 1939 Italy, as a Jewish Italian man named Guido Orefici is moving on in life. He has aspirations to open up a bookshop, but while he's in the city, he is kind of like sent to work as a waiter slash cook at his Uncle Alessio's restaurant. Guido is portrayed as a very light-hearted man who thrives on remaining optimistic even in the most darkest situation which will come his way. Guido is smitten by the timid but lovely Dora, who is a teacher who's engaged to a cocky rich guy who happens to be a government civil servant whom Guido has had some run-ins with in the past. Guido does everything in his possible ways to tempt Dora into loving him, and uses many tricks to get her to love him. Finally, after meeting her in several coincidental ironies, Dora finally is convinced and becomes in love with Guido, and at her engagement party, Guido and Dora go off. They make love in some kind of what looks like to be a garden house, and then it comes into 5 years later that Guido and Dora are now married, and now they have a 5-year-old son who goes by the name of Joshua. The early scenes of this movie mostly focus on the fascist party, and we see Guido constantly mock and belittle the party and their boasting of how nationally superior the country Italy is, which is kind of like how fascism was running in that country. To show how the fascist party is, Guido and Dora eventually they go off riding on a steed who happens to be saturated in green paint. It's a white horse painted green. And it's also filled with anti-Semitic rhetoric. On Joshua's 5th birthday, Guido, Josh, and Uncle Alessio were captured by the Nazis and were shipped off to concentration camps. While at the camp, Guido tries to console with his son Joshua, saying that this whole situation they're faced with is just a birthday game, and that if Josh can compile 1,000 points, he will be rewarded not with a toy tank, but he'll actually get to ride in a real tank. Now Josh at times wants to bail out, but the eternally optimistic Guido kept on, persuading him to keep playing. and that Josh has to stay strong, not to cry, beg for food, or ask for his mother, because if he does that, he will lose points. He also puts on little white lies for Joshua so he won't be so scared. And, he tells him things like the Nazis are only just pretending to be mean because they want the tank for themselves, and that the reason why the kids are saying things like all kids at Nazi camps are all gonna turn into soap, it's because they're lying to him, saying that, they just want to also go for the prize, and that he tells him to stay strong, hang tough, and not let anything upset him or stuff like that. Some people may often mistake Guido for being passive-aggressive, but I think he was only just doing that just to comfort his son. He knows that, a concentration camp is anything but fun, but he just tries to make it seem light to him so that he won't get scared. Joshua does not contradict at his father's word, even though the misery and the death at the camp speak volumes quite vocally. Suddenly the Americans break into camp and eventually shut down the area. So now Guido tells Joshua to hide in what looks like to be a sweat box, or it looks like kind of like a small cabinet, until everyone leaves. And then, once everyone leaves, he will come out and he will get his tank, saying that he's down to getting his 1,000 points. So now Guido eventually goes out to look for Dora, which only to be caught by a Nazi soldier who takes Guido to a hiding place where Guido gets executed. By the very next day, Joshua gets out of the cabinet and thinking everyone left. Suddenly a tank approaches. Ecstatic, Joshua finally thinks he won, so he goes off to ride in a tank with an American soldier, while the captives are hanging out to a safer territory. When Joshua notices his mother, the soldier commands to stop the tank, and Joshua and Dora are so happy to be reunited. The opening and closing narration in this movie is actually Joshua as an adult, as he tells the story of the sacrifice that his father put him through in order to help, lighten the load and to continue the legacy that even through our darkest hours, life still can have a positive effect on us. I never really actually thought the day would come when a movie centered during the Holocaust would be provided with humor. Because to be honest with you, the Holocaust was anything but funny. Then and now, as thousands of Europeans of Jewish faith were killed off mainly because of, what happened at that time, the Great Depression. You see, the Holocaust was not about some mustachioed crazy guy who just wanted to kill off Jews. No. He was only just the icing on the cake. There was more to the Holocaust than just that. The Nazism and fascism was mostly through fear, paranoia, and economical insecurity that was the main factors of Nazism, and also just plain hatred. But once in a while, towards sadness, we can actually open our hearts to try to survive the grimness by adding a little humor to raise our spirit. And that is exactly what actor, director, writer Roberto Benigni succeeds in Life is Beautiful. I actually thought it was a refreshing break from the graphic and disturbing images that has haunted the theaters past and present, like Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List or Roman Polanski's The Pianist, as we look to a more brighter side of the Holocaust, mainly toward the humor of the leading protagonist, Guido Orefici, played by Roberto Benigni. When it first came out, it was listed as a comedy, but I also thought it was just too surreal to be true. I mean, nothing funny ever happened in the Holocaust, and film adaptations have been quite demonstrative at that. In those troubled times, lives were lost, families were separated, people were cold, starving, fear and doubt was in the minds of both Europeans, Jewish and non-Jewish at the time. But Benigni showed his mastery in front and behind the camera, and we can actually enjoy the goodness of life, even through our darkest hours. Even in times of uncertainty, because, let's face it, we only live once, and we must enjoy the life we live in as much as we can. Benigni was not the only person who made this film all the more worthwhile. A nod goes out to Nicoletta Braschi, who turns in a wonderful performance as a Catholic girl who loves her husband regardless of what religion he practices. And a grand portion of scenes demonstrate just how pointless racism is. And the best example is set in the schoolroom scene. Concentration camps were probably one of the worst establishments anyone could ever dream of entering, and yet in this movie we actually can enjoy a little bit of laughter. Not at the Jewish captives, but we can actually make fun of the Nazis, because in this movie these assholes were probably some of the most stupidest brain fuckers you could ever see on celluloid. I mean, in one scene, Guido persuades the soldiers as he defends his son as a ploy to prevent his son from further circumstances, while we laugh as he tries to weasel his way out from further punishment. We are actually still aware and concerned about the welfare of Guido and his young son and the dangers they were encountering. The fearful and depressing effects of the Holocaust are exhibited in brief moments of sad truths that weave Guido's detailed fantasies. But you never see him fall victim to disparity. His wild imagination and his determination are the only weapons of protection he utilizes to keep his family and his son intact. The remarkable story of love and tenderness is worthy enough for everyone to see, and this movie should be cherished for a long time to come. I know that Mr. Benigni took a bold turn to use the Holocaust as a decoy to represent that we should always stay optimistic even through our darkest times. We only live once, so let's try to make the most out of it. And I think that we can all cherish happy moments, even through our grimmest times. When we live in self-doubt or feeling that the whole world is just too much for us to spare, think a moment. Say to yourself, life is beautiful. Things can be a lot worse. Never look at life and take it always entirely for granted. We must always stay strong. We must always pull through and persevere, even through our darkest moments. And I think that's what Mr. Benigni was trying to prove here. If I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, it definitely deserves a 9 for me. And I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of the Writer Review. Thanks for listening in. Please write back to me. Remember, be kind, be courteous, and I'll be back with another review. Till then, take care of yourselves, everyone. Goodbye.